No, go.
Do you got to do it.
Thank you for being here. Welcome here. The guest this morning today is Mr. Patty, 2017 One Bass Open winner. He's been here for 20 years. More importantly, he's a firefighter. So he helps out the community as well as being an angler and a hunter. Justin.
How's everybody doing? All right, I'm gonna try to do this as loud as I can so we can hear. I got my GoPro running over there for guys. Thank you all for coming. Like Larry said here, I have been a Phoenix fireman for the last 17 and a half years. Also been a tournament angler for about 20 years and a licensed fishing guide for about the past 10 years now. So I kind of have a general idea of what's going on our lakes locally here. Being that I am a fishing guide, I do guide on Lake Pleasant, so that's where I spend most of my time. Tournament angling, I kind of travel around Arizona, California, Texas a little bit. So kind of an all-around fisherman as far as like fishing grass and structure, stuff like that. Our lakes in Arizona are really tough lakes to fish compared to other lakes around the country because they are deep, clear reservoirs. So you're doing a lot of structure fishing. We do have Colorado River, which is a different animal in its own. You have current, you have grass, you've got smallmouth bass, you've got big stripers and stuff like that. So everything kind of adapts to what the forage is in the lake and what they're chewing on and how they're reacting to your baits and stuff. But I'm going to start out by kind of giving you guys like a fishing report for current times. Going into in early spring, I would say, typically in March, it tends to get a little cold. Right at the beginning of March, we usually have a cold snap, usually the first couple of weeks of March, so it kind of pushes the fish back from wanting to be up spawning. But we didn't really have a winter this year. It's been really, really crazy, dry, warm winter. And typically in the wintertime, we would get out and fish a lot deeper. My personal, like my favorite thing to do at Lake Pleasant or any other lake in the wintertime is to chase after the real shallow bass that get up in the sticks around the wood, more stained water, kind of holds more heat, and there's a lot more particulates in the water that allow the shad, the forage, to actually survive in that shallow water because it's just not as cold as it usually gets in the clear water. So I like to get up, beat the bushes with spinner bait, swim jig, crankbait, stuff like that. I really didn't get to do that this year that much because, number one, we've had a dry, warm winter, and Lake Pleasant has been draining for the past, I don't know, since springtime, since they started drawing it down, which is something that's weird. It's never happened this time of year. They normally are filling the lake right now, and it's flooding all that timber, and the fish have been kind of staying out. So they're staying out in that like 15 to 25, 30 foot range. A lot of the bass are setting up right now. They're kind of starting to stage on points in about 20, 25 feet. Lake Pleasant is notorious, if you're a bass fisherman, notorious for being like a structure lake. You gotta drop shot those fish. You gotta drag down on the structure. We're using high technology, all electronics now. It's forward-facing sonar. Typically, whenever I go to any lake, put the trolling motor down and I scan around, and you get a pretty good idea of where the big fish is, what depth they are. Forward facing will tell you that. The largemouth typically like to stay close to the structure. So if you see on your contours on your mapping where the lake kind of drops off into that deeper water, you'll actually be able to see the fish on your forward facing. And the bass tend to stay a little bit closer to the bottom this time of year. The stripers are above them right now. Lake Pleasant doing all the work. They're chasing the shad. There is an abundance of shad at Lake Pleasant. We have giant threadfin and we have giant gizzard shad at Lake Pleasant. So there's no shortage of food. Most of our fisheries have a lot of threadfin in them right now. So that's what they're kind of keep foraging on right now. They do get on crawdads really heavy this time of year because it is pre-spawn. So they're gonna feed up on crawdads heavily as well. Recent trips at Lake Pleasant, I typically have most of my clients throwing around a shad imitator like a square bill crankbait or a little swim bait. It seems to be versatile bait anywhere you go right now would be a 3 to 5 inch swim bait or a like 1.5 square bill. So if you guys are familiar with that, you can throw around something that just imitates a shad. It's really hard. Sometimes you have to actually throw something a lot bigger than the shad, the size of the bait, or smaller just because of how much bait there are. But my trips personally, Lake Pleasant, I will go out and I'll scan around and see if I can catch shad. You guys have probably seen a lot of guys catching a lot of big stripers in Lake Pleasant the past few years. I will use the cast net and catch some live shad with clients, and when you catch live shad, if you're able to, it's pretty much 1 for 1. You will get one bite per shad. It's almost guaranteed you'll get bit, even when the fishing is really tough. So it makes it a lot funner on those trips where it's tough this time of year. But we've been doing that lately. We haven't caught any really big stripers this year yet. Typically we're out spooning out deeper water and you will catch some bigger ones. We just didn't really have the shad die off this year like we normally do when the water gets really cold. So I think a lot of those fish are just from 30 foot all the way up, to 5 foot of water, and the spoon bite just hasn't been really all that great. But we're coming into the pre-spawn, and the pre-spawn is a really fun time of year to fish and catch big fish because they're fat, they're full of eggs. You're going to catch some of the larger fish that you're going to catch throughout the year. And I've got a couple baits for you guys I want to go over for you guys to catch pre-spawn fish. I would say number one, like I talked about before, your square bill style baits right here. And what this is a shallow running square bill shad imitator. And when those fish get up shallow on that bait, this has a real erratic vibration. The square bill deflects off of structure really well. So you're not going to snag it as easy as if you have like a deep diving crankbait with a longer bill. It's going to deflect off the structure really well, and it resembles that bait fish almost identically right there. So I have clients throw these a lot, most of the time throughout the winter, all through the spring, until it gets warmer months after the shad spawn and they start getting deeper. I'll have them throw the square bill here. This is probably the #1 reaction bait for clients pretty much anywhere. It comes over grass really well, and it doesn't get really deep. So if you're fishing a grass lake, I just came back from Martinez Lake. The grass was growing up in about 6 foot of water. You can reel it down, just hit the tops of the grass and pop it out, and the fish react to that. And probably my #1 for reaction as far as getting bites. If you guys want to go a little bit deeper, something a little more obnoxious, I do throw a red and brown, something that resembles a crayfish this time of year, because what happens is a lot of the bigger females are going to be up, they're going to be rooting around for crawfish, and something to get them to react a little bit different color than just the natural shad colors is the reds and the browns and oranges. This is a Curve 55 from 6 cents, has a little bit longer bill, as you can tell from the square bill. This is just going to get a little bit deeper. It does deflect off of wood really well, but make sure you guys have something in this color during the springtime. Lake Pleasant isn't a very big red crankbait lake, believe it or not. Most of the crawdads in the salt chain and the Colorado River chain, they actually have great crawdads, so that's why they eat red, but they still eat red even at Lake Pleasant. It's just something different, something that stands out and gets them to react. So be versatile when it comes to your crankbaits there. During the pre-spawn, you get a lot of big fish that'll kind of stage up in there. They're in an area where they want to spawn, and with all that bait swimming around them, it's hard to get bit sometimes. So if you guys haven't thrown a jerkbait, make sure you guys have a jerkbait tied on. I think the reason why the jerkbait works so well this time of year is the way that the cadence that you work your bait. It gets a reaction out of them. It has a lot more movement in the bait, rather than just kind of reeling right past them. You actually jerk the rod tip, the bait pops left and right. but I get a lot of bites on the jerkbait pre-spawn on the pause. So you get those fish to acknowledge your bait, they look at it, and you'll see them on the forward-facing sonar, and they'll be looking at it, you give it one good twitch, and then they react to it. The jerkbait has caught me a lot of really big fish in the pre-spawn before the fish lock onto beds. They're still chasing shad, they're still feeding up from the winter time, and you just get a reaction out of the jerkbait. There's a wide variety of jerkbaits you can throw, but this is the 6 cents, this is the Junior +1, it just goes a little bit deeper. Make sure you have a nice medium action rod. I like to throw my jerkbaits on a soft rod. That way it gives the bait the right action it needs to get those reaction strikes. So we're coming into early spring. This is also a really good bait that I use all winter long. This is the 6 cents Divine Swim Jig. You can put whatever size trailer you want on this swim jig. I've learned at Lake Pleasant, because there's so much bait and that the gizzard shad are so big, I use a little bit bigger trailer. So this is a 4.4 Divine swim bait trailer on this thing. And you can see that I got the eyes are knocked off this thing. I've had this for the last couple of years. And like I said, when you have an abundance of shad, when you have so much food for them to be eating, you got to throw something that kind of stands out. So if you're throwing something like this that looks very similar to the same size as the thread fin, and you're not getting bites, you're not getting reactions, go to something a little bit bigger. I'm not a real big swim bait guy. I do throw some glide baits during the springtime and usually post spawn, but this swim jig here is probably my confidence baits for getting bigger bites. You can tell it's probably about 5 inches total, you know, but it's a great bait. I go with all white during the springtime, pre-spawn and post-spawn. When the shad starts spawning and they're up shallow and there's just thousands of shad just popping on the surface, you can't go wrong with a white. This is real bright white, stands out, gets some bites. You can also put some chartreuse in there to get those fish to bite. Okay. Now, for those of you that are going to target more bass, those baits will all catch, you know, mostly everything. You'll catch white bass, stripers, largemouth, crappies. Sometimes you'll catch big crappies on those baits. But if you're targeting bass, solely bass, I think probably the #1 bait for pre-spawn would be a stick bait. Some sort of stick bait, weightless Senko. This is the Divine Shaky Head from 6 cents. I'm sponsored by 6 cents. You guys see I throw a lot of 6 cents baits, but something that has a slow fall, kind of stays in the strike zone. A lot of those fish are staging. They're going to pull up and they're going to stage around the wood, around the tree. So what I do, I take my clients out and we target the wood in the early spawn or early spring. We'd be throwing a stick bait around. Because it sinks so slow, a lot of times it'll sink past them and they'll be watching it kind of flutter down, and it's an easy target for them to just ambush, run up and grab it. Obviously you have bluegills and other forage fish that are moving up at the same time to spawn as well. So you can have a lot of bluegill around their beds, and bass don't want those bluegill eating their eggs, so they're gonna be eating on something that looks like a bluegill. But probably the easiest bait, if you have kids, probably the easiest bait in the springtime to have kids catch fish on. And you really don't do much with this bait at all. You're gonna throw it towards like some wood or structure that you can physically see out of the water, and you're gonna watch your line. You've gotta be a line watcher. And you can see your line either jump or you'll see it start swimming off left or right. You know that the fish has got it. With a spinning rod, it's really nice. You just kind of reel into them. You know, these open hook like this. This is a wacky worm hook, the way it's hooked. You just reel into them and you usually have them right in the lip. And you catch really, really big bass this time of year. A lot of times when I'm bed fishing and I'm having a hard time catching a big female on a bed, I'll throw a wacky worm, something that just looks a lot more natural, sinks a lot more slower, and probably the #1 pre-spawn, during spawn bait right here for you guys. I throw it on a medium action rod, and just make sure you have like a 7'2" medium spinning rod. It throws these baits a lot easier. You don't want to overpower this bait, so usually a 7-foot to 7.2-foot medium action rod. This is my 6 Cents Deluxe. It's a very versatile rod, and it's got a fast tip on it, so I can feel those fish. Even on a slack line, I'll actually feel it through the braid. If you guys want to get into the line a little bit, I personally like braid. I use 10-pound Sunlight SX1 with usually a 6 to 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. You guys can use straight fluorocarbon. Me personally, I think it's just, you have no line twist at all with braid, so you're not going to have to worry about straightening out your line or anything. But I do recommend using braid to fluoro or fluorocarbon over monofilament, just because monofilament gets a lot of memory in here. The guys will start out with monofilament line. You'll notice when you're casting, it comes off the spool, it's all messed up, and usually what I do at that point, I cut it down all the way down, halfway down the spool, and then I'll spool up the rest of it with braid, and then I'll put the fluorocarbon leader on the end there. I do recommend fluorocarbon. It has the same light index as water, so it's essentially invisible underwater to them. So that's our stickworm there, and then another thing that's been big all over the country, it's winning tournaments everywhere, is the minnow. Now this is probably more geared towards you guys that have forward-facing sonar. This is one of my favorite setups right here for using forward-facing sonar. And actually, for those of you that don't know what forward-facing sonar is, it actually shows you on your screen. You can scan around and you can actually visibly see, oh yeah, we have the juggle minnows here. You can actually see fish that's in front of you. Now I set my forward-facing distance to about 80 to 100 feet. That's usually about the maximum that I can throw with a spinning rod is about 100 feet. And you're gonna see your bait actually sink down to the fish that are suspended, and you can actually work your bait and entice those fish watching them on the screen. A lot of times you want to get the bait past the fish, and then you just give it subtle little shakes, and you'll watch your bait come into the strike zone. Usually when the fish sees it, you want to start pulling that bait away like it's a fleeing bait fish. But you get a little minnow like this in front of them, and if they're on it, if they turn on this bait, most likely they're going to eat it and pick up and over the fish's head, and you'll watch them on the forward facing swim up and eat it. It's really cool. It's actually super addicting. If you haven't done it before, I know a lot of the crappie guys and stuff like that have gotten where they just sit on brush piles and they just soak a minnow over top of them, and they just fill the limits really quick. But this is something that is a lot more finesse, in my opinion. 6 Cents has these custom rods here. This is a 6.9 medium light rod. I'm using the same. This is a 10-pound braid. It's a sinking braid from Sunline, but same thing. I got a 7-pound leader on here. This is a 6 Cents juggle minnow. There's 100 different minnows that you can use. I really like, obviously being sponsored with 6 Cents. They have the Aussie, which they just came out with a little bit bigger. But this size minnow from 6 Cents just has a real realistic look to it, and you know, you gotta switch it up sometimes. You gotta switch up the head. I usually throw anywhere between a 1/16 to a 3/16 head. A 1/8 is kind of standard for this type of fishing, but you can really get a lot of fish this time of year that are up, kind of staging. You'll see them, you know, suspended in the water column, like especially in that like 10 to 15 foot range. It's really effective. But you can also fish this down for stripers. We'll fish a bait similar like this for stripers at Lake Pleasant over like 75 foot of water. So it's really effective for stripers in the summertime when they get really, really tough to catch. We'll just put a little bit heavier 5/16 ounce head on this thing, and you'll actually drop down to them and watch them chase it up. And it's really, really cool. But just remember, this is seasonal stuff that I'm talking about right now. A lot of this stuff you'll go out and you'll catch fish on in the next 2 months, and then after the spawn and the shad spawn, you know, it gets kind of tough in the summertime. So what I see a lot of people do, the mistake that a lot of people make, is they catch fish on something one time of the year, and they throw that all year long trying to catch them on it. So it's always changing on our lakes, and because our lakes are deep, you know, clear reservoirs, especially Lake Pleasant, it drops vertically 75 feet or so every year. So the structure that you might be fishing this time of year is going to be 40 foot underwater here come summertime. So just keep that in mind. Larry found some juggle minnows over here. We got for 6 cents. We're trying to get 6 cents in most retailers. Cabela's and Bass Pro slowly get more and more stuff. If you guys want to check out, I've got a card over here. If you want to check out any of this stuff, come take a look at it. You order it directly from 6 cents. You can use my code, save some money. So just keep that in mind. I'll probably go into a question and answers right now. If you guys have any questions for me, I don't know, I went over some stuff pretty quickly. You guys have any questions on any of the gear that I showed you here, or rods, line, or anything like that? Or anybody?
Yeah, no, forgot what jig it was, just a little warmer down on it. Guys, how far do you let it drop?
So you're talking about the stick bait?
Yeah, stick bait, yes.
Typically, I like to let this hit the bottom. Okay. So if the fish are in 10 foot of water, especially when you're using the weightless worm, you got to be patient with it. You got to let it hit the bottom. So what you see a lot of times the bass will do, when they're really hot, when they're pulled up onto the structure that they're going to spawn on, usually you throw your stick worm out to it, and like before it even hits the bottom, you'll see your bait swimming off left to right. But I get most of my bites, they'll actually watch the bait sink down because it sinks really slow and it pulsates. And when it hits the ground, a lot of times they want to pin stuff to the, so it doesn't get away. So that's when they'll nose down on it and they'll eat it and you'll see your line jump. But I kind of do the same thing when I throw a stick bait. I'm structure fishing. So I'm going down the bank and I see a tree, I flick my stick bait out. I'm still moving kind of forward towards the target. I'm watching my line, it hits the bottom. I usually give it one pop, makes that bait kind of pulsate up, hits the bottom, and I reel it in. And then I throw to the next tree. And that's how I cover water in the early springtime with this bait. It just seems to be very, very effective that way. It's not the greatest bait for working deep structure. You can't put a nail weight. This one actually has a little nail weight at the end of it. And you can throw it in deeper water and work down structure, but because you have a nail weight in there, it's not as sensitive to the bottom as it would be if you were just to hook this bait onto like a shaky head or something like that. But super effective bait and really good for putting. I've seen a lot of tournaments won on a Cinco, or other weightless wacky worms this time of year. So definitely check those out. Anyone else? Anybody have any questions regarding electronics or Lake Pleasant or anything? I actually do the retail business for Bass Pro Shops for the Lowrance electronics over here. I am going to be over here in the next few minutes checking out the electronics, doing updates, stuff like that. So if you guys have any questions on that kind of stuff, just come on over and check it out. But I appreciate you guys showing up. I know there was a lot. Yeah.
Lake Pleasant.
Yep.
Say you're fishing off the shore, what would you use for something like that?
So Lake Pleasant is a really tough lake to fish offshore because they've limited access.
Yeah.
Used to be able to drive down Cass Hot Springs Road and fish all the way up to the culverts there off the bank, and they've made that kind of blocked off. And unfortunately, we don't have fishing docks at Lake Pleasant. Lake Pleasant is like a holding reservoir for water. Maricopa County Water District regulates all the stuff that game and fish can do in there, so it's hard for them to get habitats and stuff put in there. But if it were me, if I were to go fish Lake Pleasant, you can actually access behind, if you go down Castle Hot Springs Road, you could actually go behind the park and you can come in around like Goose Bay and Humbug. There's some access back there, and that's where a lot of the shad, a lot of the stuff are moved up into the creek channels this time of year. And then just throw around structure. I would have, especially if you're throwing from the bank, you're probably going to snag a lot. So have a weightless worm. It doesn't snag the bottom as easy as it like through a drop shot. You're dragging a drop shot around. But have your weightless worms. Have a square bill. It kind of reflects off the bottom a little bit easier, and then you can throw around spinner baits and crankbaits, stuff like that. But right now is a fun time because they're kind of in all the water column. They're all the way, like I said. I mean, you can find fish right now at 50 foot of water all the way up to 0 foot of water. Now, Lake Pleasant's gonna slowly start filling. They have to fill it because it's a holding reservoir. But when that happens, the largemouth are gonna get right on the bank. They like to get right on the bank and their nose up. When you're on a boat, you're throwing to the backs of the cuts and you're dragging out, and you'll get bit 2 foot of water. So hopefully that starts popping off for everybody here. But unfortunately, if you're gonna fish from the bank, I would personally say Bartlett would probably be a little bit easier lake to go fish off the bank, and you'll catch a lot more bass off the bank at Bartlett. So that's my advice to you guys. But anything else? Thank you guys. I appreciate y'all coming and hanging out with us. If you guys have any other questions, I'll be hanging out for a little bit here. And,
Justin, thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for showing up. You'll be here for a little bit. If you have any questions about baits and that, we'll be happy to help you.
Yeah.
All right,
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.